Welcome to the fine print, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caleb Teskey, and today I am joined by Chris Mandracchia from CDM Law in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. Chris, pleasure
How
to
you
have you on,
doing?
sir. Yeah,
Thanks for having me on today.
yeah. Well, thanks for reaching out, man.
Yeah. I just
Certainly one of
I thought you're a great person to have a conversation about justice with too, because I know you understand the cannabis side of it, and all the people in the cannabis industry have seen the different sides of the law, including the justice system. And we are now in a more legitimate space, but we've had to gone through that. And there's a lot of our world in the cannabis space that still is in this justice system. So I think it's
certainly
great to have that conversation.
certainly one of the more surprising phone calls I've received in my life. Uh, and before we get into anything too serious here, would you give us a 5-minute life story?
Sure. I've been a lawyer since I guess 2010. I went to school in Miami and did internship down there, criminal defense work. I was in a prosecutor for about 5 years in Berks County, Pennsylvania, and then I went to private practice with my father. Did criminal defense and civil litigation, and then in 2019 I started my own law firm, CDM Law. I focused more on criminal defense and cannabis business type work and civil litigation. And then the pandemic hit, and we did a lot more cannabis work and justice work. And I've always been involved with criminal work my whole life. I think I've always had a passion for the justice system. And I believe that people's rights are important. And it's important to honor the Constitution, that you're innocent until proven guilty. And we see a lot of abuse in our justice system right now. And especially in the cannabis space and the criminal space, you just see abusive process. Even throughout the whole pandemic, people were just locked up for a long period of time without justice. So it's been sad, it's been crazy.
Yeah, and when you say like, oh, I immediately just think of like civil asset forfeiture cases when you're talking about that. It's like, I was kind of hoping those would go away during legalization, but doesn't seem like that's happening.
No, I mean, just Pennsylvania is still a prohibition state. We're still going to jail here for cannabis, and there's a lot of issues with it all together. And the criminal justice system is no joke when you get involved with it. And there's plenty of crazy crimes out there and a lot of things going on in the world. So it gets pretty intense, even when you're dealing with from cannabis to violent crimes to any kind of crime. It's the justice system needs to be analyzed because of what's going on. And you see the death of people and incarcerated. You see the abuse of power by police, and these are all big questions that need to be tackled.
And I imagine it's I'm from Vermont, so I'm gonna say the cops are just relatively chill compared to a lot of other states. I would say, especially a lot of the redder states or conservative. Things like that, religious. It seems like, boy, they really just crack the whip when it comes to even stuff like cannabis, which is, boy, that sucks. People still going to jail over there, man. Ugh.
Yeah,
And they
really,
have medical, right? The Pennsylvania's a medical only.
yeah, it's a medical only state. So, but people go to jail for stupid things, like even possession charges. You see people get, I mean, maybe overnight, but then the possessions turn to DUIs here, which are have people going to jail for a couple of days or losing their license or their jobs just because you're using your medicine.
Cannabis DUIs. Medical patients are going to jail for cannabis DUIs.
100%. Yeah. It's
Wow.
There's no tolerance whatsoever for that right now. That's amazing.
Have you been involved in any of those cases?
Oh, yes, definitely. A lot of those cases, but the problem right now is there is no more defense because they don't have the prior impairment. It's just that they can lawfully get your blood when you have THC in your system, your DUI.
And let's do this right now because I wasn't even this wasn't even on the list, but the DUI laws are something that I've been talking about with a lot of people. And personally, I watched them talk about this in the advisory, the subcommittee meetings, and even Mark Levine from the Department of Health and the consulting firm, Mark Gorman from the NACB. They both agreed, and they had cops on this subcommittee too. They both had to stop at one point and agree, and they said, The problem is that there's really no scientific consensus for what constitutes impairment. And what they've done, it seems, is just taken the exact same standard field sobriety tests that they use for alcohol, and they said, we're going to use that for cannabis. And boy, they're training new drug recognition experts now to detect signs of impairment. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on this issue, because I certainly have some strong feelings.
I definitely have strong feelings. This is one of the things I fight passionately about, because even the drug recognition experts, I mean, a lot of these guys have never used cannabis, and they're telling you what impairment under cannabis means, and they're using such standards as a green tongue to say you're impaired, which is wild. I don't know who the hell gets green. So if you look actually at their DRE manuals, you can actually pull their manuals. They follow certain protocols and they say certain things.
12-step protocol
in the manual. And one of their protocols as says a sign of impairment for marijuana is a green tongue. Usually, what they're getting at is that you have cotton mouth, and like, I guess, residue in your mouth. But so the impairment issue is a problem, and that's one of the things holding back cannabis as it relates to driving safety. They obviously say that they cannot detect impairment because everybody has an endocannabinoid system that regulates cannabis differently. We have different body compositions, so the way cannabis breaks down in your body, you could have a 20 nanograms per milliliter versus 50 and have different levels of impairment. You can't measure the same science like we do with alcohol. And for them to prove impairment in court is the only fair way to do this. To have to get somebody to say, hey, they were high while driving and impaired and could have caused danger to somebody, not it's in your system like we have, which is a per se, just penalize it for being in your blood. And especially in a case like Pennsylvania, we have a right to have it medically. You can go to the store to get it. Well, everybody leaving that store is probably DUI when they leave, even if they took nothing within a week. So
cops could just sit right across the street. They could sit right across the street and just pop everybody that came out of there if they wanted to.
And then if you see what they're doing now, they're having like these, they're talking about these breathalyzer type tests that test for recent use. And again, the same issue, like, just think you go and have one beer. You can go have one beer and drive a car, right? Well, they're saying now that means that you can't have one puff off a joint and drive a car because you must be high. Well, that's not accurate either. So we have to take all that into account. And cannabis also has the different methods of ingestion, which changes everything. If you eat an edible versus smoke a joint, smoke a bong, do a dab, like, they're all going to change how you feel and when it hits you. And like, if you actually look at the blood level analysis on edibles, it's like a low lying line and it stays low. But like, if anybody's ever used edibles, it's like 2 hours later, boom, and they may not correlate to the impairment, the levels that are in your system, but because it's breaking down and converting to delta 10 carboxy THC when you're getting high with edibles. So, cannabis DUIs is a big issue, and it's one of the things holding cannabis back, and they need to just treat it as maybe they need to educate cops better about impairment of cannabis. But it's really tough right now to really test. It's almost impossible to prove who's impaired unless you get the obvious signs of falling over a stone, like laughing their ass off, like saying I'm too fucking high. But tests do show that if you're too high to drive, people aren't driving when they're high. It's when you're drunk and too drunk, you're gonna get behind the wheel. So it's a different mindset also when you're stoned versus drunk. So,
and that's even the police officer that was on the advisory committee, Ingrid Jonas. I remember her at one point saying, she's like, I don't even really know how cannabis is metabolized, and she's like, I didn't realize edibles like took up to 2 hours to kick in. It's like, okay, so like that's where we're at there. We're still dealing with people.
Edibles are always a problem. Think about that. Edibles have always been the problem because everybody thinks it's easier. We're a culture that gives you goes to bars where you eat things and drink things, and we're told smoking things is bad. But so they take edibles and they don't feel it, and they maybe have a drink of a beer or two, and then an hour later you take another edible, and all of a sudden this stuff all hits you at one time. Now we don't know what the hell's going on. Now we're in trouble.
And I will for sure say that when the times that I feel too high to drive, it's always from edibles. And you're exactly right. I'm just like, I'm gonna wait this one out. It's the opposite.
It's like, you can't drive, get an Uber now, especially nowadays where if you're in a populated city, there's no real reason to be driving impaired. I mean, you have an Uber most places.
No, not up here. We're out.
I guess in my areas,
We're
most places.
probably 20 years out on that.
Understood. Understood.
I'd like to ask you a little bit. It said, I believe you said you used to work for your dad, and then you popped off. Why'd you decide to start your own firm?
I want to be more, I guess, involved with what I would like to do, and that was also focused within cannabis and criminal. That's the areas I really liked, and fighting for people's rights and justice is something I've always. It's the reason I became a lawyer. Is I'll never, I think, no matter what I do in law, I don't think I'll ever stop doing criminal cases because I believe in justice and the Constitution, and that people are innocent until proven guilty, and that people can be improperly accused of criminal accusations without getting their due process rights. And if you're ever part of the system, you ever feel accusations against you, it's heavy, it's quick, it's hard. And essentially what they're doing is using your own taxpayer dollars against you. And if you don't have a lot of money, guess what? It's pretty tough to beat the system without money. It takes time and money to beat the system. So the system comes at you like that. And it's something that I believe that people need to understand the system so that they can fight for themselves, and that they need to understand their rights.
And now, well, that's a tough one. Reading is hard for some people.
Understood.
But you have a curious sort of perspective here, I suppose, because you said you came from the prosecutorial side over to the defense side, and you've talked a little bit here about some of the procedural errors did you see a lot of that when you were working prosecution?
I think you see a lot in the justice system in general. Anybody involved with the trial type litigation aspects of this will see things differently than most, because they see, I mean, realistically, you're in a system where you have police that are trained witnesses, right? That's their job. They go make arrests, write reports that match their arrests, gather evidence to support their arrests, and then testify about it. They memorize it, they spit it out, they have their ways, and that's what they do. And then they put on their suits and look charming and try to, mystify the jury and say, "Believe me, I'm a cop."
Hey, you also look charming, Chris. Nice jacket there.
I appreciate it. CDM wall here. I don't know if you can see.
Well, you talked about sort of using their tricks against them, I believe, on the phone. So looking good is probably one of those.
Well, I mean, I think that you have to play the part at times, but I think I'm a different attorney than many, because I don't believe a suit and tie is necessary to bring justice to somebody. I think that we're all people, and I think the pandemic should have taught us all a lot, when half of us were doing like courtroom with underwear on maybe and a jacket. Like, really, do you need a full suit to get somebody justice? No, you don't. What's really matters
it's probably more comfortable with no pants on. You
exactly.
Relax and make sure you get your best defense possible to your client.
I mean, I wish I could wear sneakers in court. People don't want to see that, but it is what the system is. The funny thing about the law system, the justice system, it's really antiquated. I mean, I go to some courts, we still use carbon copy paper. I mean, that's crazy. Like you think about that.
Vermont's just getting onto like the digital filing, still working on that, but it's like we're getting there at least. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely antiquated is a great word for it.
But then if you go forward, it's like then people are making changes, like the Johnny Depp trial. Like, that was tried in the media, that was tried through TikTok and through social media. I mean, I believe it was. So that goes to the really fundamental issues of our system, of that it's supposed to be a system tried by a jury, and everybody should have a fair trial. And how do you play fair now when you have district attorneys coming out making really strong accusations that they're facts and tainting a jury pool because you have media that sways it one way? The answer now seems to be, well, we have social media, we have our own voice, we can put our own voice out now. We don't need to get chopped up by the media. We can have independent thinkers that we want to speak with. Like, I want to speak with you because you are an independent thinker. You're not coming from the side of, hey, this is the conservative way, this is the way it must be, this is what looks good on news, this is the great story. What's the truth? That's what we should be getting at. What is the truth behind this? And what are the facts analyzed on both sides, not just one side?
And right? That seems to be that, it's especially so. I'm just imagining like back in, the early 1900s, it's much harder to contaminate a jury pool. You can't post something on fucking Facebook and have the whole world see it and feed it back to you, so you'd have to like go to the next town and be like, yo, do you hear about this shit? And, so,
Look
but
about
as
like Bill Cosby. Like think about them tainting him. Like they tried that all through that. Hey, Bill Cosby, he's a bad guy all of a sudden. There he is. And whatever you think about Bill Cosby, they did that all through the media, right?
sure, sure, absolutely. And yeah, whether he did it or not, I mean, that absolutely happened. And that seems,
And
especially with high profile celebrity cases, I mean, that seems to just be the norm, really.
yep. So we're missing the point of the system of that there should be two sides to the story. Even with the celebrity side, think about how much money they have to pump into these, how much money they had talked about, how much they're spending on those trials. I mean,
Yeah, it's
you need to
ridiculous.
have a lot of money to really be involved in the system and do it right. And the problem with the justice system is usually somebody that doesn't have too much money versus the government who has all of your money. Not just money, it's your money they're using against you. And they get all the best experts. They get everybody they want, and they train them to do what they want to do. And that's how it's experts putting them in, analyzing it. You don't hear both sides always. You don't hear half the facts always by the time you get to court either.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that because this is something I've certainly noticed. Um, when it comes to prosecuting cases, it seems like they always got multiple prosecutors over there, and then you'll have, like 100 clients with one fucking sad and tired, underpaid public defender on the other side. And the whole, when they arrest you, what do they tell you? If you can't afford one, it'll be appointed to you. You know, it's like, well, why don't you appoint me like one of those guys over on the other side? Like those guys are, give me a couple maybe. Like if you're gonna, why is it so slanted? It's clearly like outnumbered, and that is what. Yeah, thank you for saying that because people usually think I'm getting a little wild with that, but it's like it is your money. Like the judge is being paid with your money, the cops that arrested you are being paid with your money, the lawyers that are prosecuting you get paid with your money, the expert witnesses that they call
Mm-hmm.
probably get paid with your money. The
Yep.
jury that has to be called is probably being paid with your money. So
No, jurors don't get paid much at all. Trust me.
yeah,
That's
but that's
not
still
a
tax money though, isn't it?
yeah, but
For
trust me,
whatever. Okay.
they make
But
they lose money by going. In my opinion, a juror usually, and that's another flaw you have in the system. You have jurors who are basically losing money, don't want to be there, and the people that want to be on a jury, it's really questionable why do they want to be on this jury? What agenda do they have? I
uh,
mean, really, like, it, I don't know many people that actually want to be on juries. I'm one of those strange people that would love to be on a jury. I'll never get picked because I love this is what I do for a living. I would love to sit and see somebody else's trial and see how that goes. But this isn't what's happening right now. It's you have people either the retired folks or something like that that have nothing better to do that are interested, or you have some people that want to do their civic duty, and that's great. But they also tend to a lot of times be similar type of people in your jury pool that trust police more than they trust anybody else. And you know, it's a good show when you come in and bring everybody in with badges on and his fancy suits and take their guns off and yes sir, and they have their whole stories lined up and they've done this every day. It's definitely a good show you get to watch.
yeah, well, I mean, they've certainly taken enough money from us to put on a good show.
I hope they I mean, look, you better hope they do a good job, but that's why you should really that's why our system's set up to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt in the justice system, the highest burden out there, and that's what they should be held to, and that's what a jury needs to do is to hold them to the highest standard and question everything they say. Why don't they have more? Like, why don't you have more evidence? That's the question you'd be asking. If you have real like question of why isn't that there, it's better to say not guilty, because if they're really guilty, they're a criminal. Usually they're gonna do something again. It's the saying is it's better to let 10 guilty men go free than one innocent man go to jail.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And yeah, that's supposed to be the whole point of this, right?
Yeah,
uh,
we're supposed to be sure that somebody did something, and that's where I get problems with this. Is that when we're crucifying people ahead of time, before we get to the point of where we're actually analyzing the facts, and we're only taking one side of it, we're not doing our job as citizens to give somebody a fair shot. And if it was you in that boat, you'd want a fair shot because it's
can
hard when the
can
government's
confirm.
coming at you. Yeah. right? It's the government comes at you. It's tough. There's a lot of heat on you. Your life gets taken away from you, and you know you're scrambling. Like crap. Even if you did nothing wrong, you should feel pressure. Like you should.
That's just as soon as I get pulled over, same deal. It's like even if I'm doing nothing wrong, I'm like, and for
And then
sure, like,
again, if you do, again if you don't, right? The cops say, "Oh, he must be impaired. He must do this because you're nervous. You must be committing
yeah,
a crime because you're nervous, right?" But whoa, it's like, and then he's not nervous, so he must be a known criminal,
must be a sociopath or something.
yeah,
Yeah,
right?
that,
You talk to the police, you're damned, right? You don't talk to the police, they shouldn't be able to comment on it, but then they use it against you. Well, they didn't talk to us, therefore they're guilty. We're going to charge you. Just talk to us. No, don't ever talk to the police for real. That's the best advice anybody can ever give anybody is if the question is, am I under arrest? If the answer is yes, guess what? Shut up. If the answer is no, I want to leave. They tell you can't leave, then then you're being detained and you don't talk.
yeah, I struggled with that sometimes. Just running
But
my mouth.
you
I
get
just,
nervous. Everybody wants to talk. Everybody
well,
wants to
yeah,
always talk.
I don't want to answer questions. I want to talk shit, you know? Um, but yeah, that nervous thing, dude, that's another thing that's just always driven me nuts, you know? Like, I remember being like 18 or 19, I got pulled over in New Hampshire for speeding. And here comes this fucking guy. He's about 6'3". He's a I don't know, 230, I'd say. Just a big, like, corn-fed country New Hampshire boy. And it's like, yeah, okay, I am nervous. I got a giant, like, jacked up stranger with a gun pulled me over on the side of the road and is now approaching me. And yes, and now he's got another guy pulling up behind him. And now I'm a little more nervous. Like, and you know what's funny is that cops will say the same shit. You don't know how scary it is. When you approach a car, it could be anyone in that car. It's like, yeah, see, you're fucking nervous too. We're all nervous here. Like, that's not like uh cause like suspicious. That's just a normal
Shit, I
human
I get
reaction.
nervous and I deal with these guys all the time. Think about it. Like I question them all the time, and I don't care. You get pulled over speeding, you're nervous. You want to talk. You want to like be like, "What the hell did you pull me over for?" Like I don't get it. We're all speeding usually. Think about it. When you get pulled over 9 times out of 10, you're with like a group of people that are speeding on the damn highway or something. So
Mm.
yeah.
What do we got? I'm trying to transition. My notes got a little jumbled because I had to jump
No
ahead
problem.
here. But I'd
Great.
like to
Good
do.
conversations about
I,
justice. So
I do want to talk about sort of this. I mean, the media blitz. It sounds like you've seen this firsthand, and I know. Boy, we just saw it up here with the cannabis company.
yep.
They got caught using myclobutanol, or it was on their product. I don't want to say that. Let me rephrase. But boy, this doesn't happen often in Vermont. But that story hit fucking every Digger had it. WCAX had it. Um, I think 7 days got everybody. It was in newspapers. It's like, boy, those motherfuckers are pretty much done now. Like, you can't come back from that kind of thing. Even
Because
if it,
remember, everybody's a news option now. Everybody has a phone and has social media, and everybody can report. You know, everybody can. Not everybody's credible or qualified, but anybody can report. You know what
uh,
I mean?
I don't know if I'm qualified, but I feel like I'm sort of
Definitely.
credible at least.
I
I'm not a
think you'd be good.
professional, but
No, definitely professional.
uh, um, yeah. And what's so I'd like to ask you like about. It sounded like when you prosecuted, you did some homicides, and I believe you said some child sex crimes, DUIs. Well, that's a lesser one.
I mean, I
I'd
was
like
lucky
to.
to be able to work in the prosecution side and see every side of it, do every kind of case, work with along with great other prosecutors and work alongside the cops and see how they work cases and take them from beginning to end. And the justice system in general, is about fairness and it's about the people. And when you get into a system like that, you have to realize like, I was a human being that made decisions that affected people's lives. And everybody that has that responsibility should think about it that way because you have a special responsibility when you're a prosecutor. Not everybody takes it that way. It turns into a job a lot of times. It turns into politics a lot of times and personal agendas. And the reality is you're dealing in human lives and that's serious and it should be taken that way. And it starts from the beginning, from charging, from arrest, from prosecution to the whole investigation to how good is that cop involved to how good is that prosecutor involved, to the victims involved, the witnesses involved, everybody. It all comes together in the very beginning, and the story is kind of formed from there. But the justice system takes it through. But you'll see it's not always fair. It's not always just. Um, Again, cops do lie. Cops do have egos. They are people, and their pride gets hurt or whatever it is. They have vendettas with people, and a lot of times you see things in cities a lot differently where you have a back and forth relationship. It's cops and robbers. I mean, really, you think about it, it's like you have good guys and bad guys, and they go after each other all the time. And the people you see have records all the time, so it can get very serious, and the process isn't always fair. It's not always accurate, and one lie can cause a really big ripple effect, and people's lives get ruined. And people should really think about that when you're going through the system, that it's not a quick process, even though it's a fair, just, speedy trial. I mean, we have cases going on for 3 years now because of the whole pandemic. So it's a rough system to see going through, and to do very serious crimes. There's two sides. There are really bad people out there. There are really good cops out there, and there are really bad cops out there. There are both of everything. There are good people and bad people. And just to say that you can't always trust cops is not accurate. Some cops are truthful. Some do a good job against great things and get bad guys off the street. And there are some that don't care and do horrible things and are lying, stealing, cheating, doing their own purpose, and have their own motivations. So we always have to remember that in the system, it's a bunch of people, and we're supposed to have rules, and that's what's supposed to set the game fair. But when you bend and break the rules to your own advantage and use money and power to get ahead, it doesn't seem like a fair playing field where you're not getting a fair shot at justice.
Yeah, and one thing we talked about, well, was the deposition thing, because I was asking you about the defense, and you said you don't get to depose witnesses as a criminal defense attorney, which blew my
in Pennsylvania.
Mind. In Pennsylvania,
so I used to work in Florida too, and when I was an intern down there, we did get to depose people, and it was amazing because I thought that was neat. Because I came from, again, my dad's been a defense lawyer my whole life.
Right, so you get to interview people, kind of like, so that's why I wanted to ask you, because I interview people all day, but you're interviewing some people about, it sounds like, murders and child sex crimes, which must be pretty intense. How do you stay calm in there, and how do you go about getting the information that you need?
I think it's asking a lot of questions, asking them in different ways, and being thorough, and I think objectively. I think one of the problems I see in the system is that people put their narrow blinders on, and you're looking through a telescope that's a microscope, and you're saying, hey, I'm focusing on one key on my keyboard. That's where the dirt must be. That's where the problem's coming from. You got to step back and look at the whole computer and say, hey, there could be multiple keys involved in this. There could be a lot of things going on here, and you have to rule those out, before you get to that. You can't just fixate on one path. And if you just fixate on one path, you're not doing your job right, and then you have to follow up the path to make sure you get things to secure what is right. There's a lot of evidence out there nowadays. We have phones, we have video, we have all this stuff out there that's constantly telling people things about us that, it's pretty hard to commit a crime right now and get away with it if you're using technology.
I just feel like I've watched a lot of shows about wrongful convictions and things of that nature, or false confessions, maybe. And, there's definitely a concern, those, I'm not sure how often or how frequently this is happening, but boy, when you watch those cases, some of these cops or whoever's, talking to these people, it's rather than trying to find the truth, it seems like they ask them leading questions. They have their narrative already, and they try to, rather than asking questions to try to get to the truth, they say, this is the truth, and now we're going to form our questions to try to funnel you down to that point where we want you to get to.
What is it? Did you ever see How to Make a Murderer?
Oh God,
that's the blew my mind. But exactly, if you think about that case, I have a lot of questions about a lot of things in that case.
Yeah, that kid, so Brandon, boy, he clearly was not, he had some mental handicaps, or learning
Well,
disability. I don't
that
know
that
what.
goes by the questioning. You can manipulate kids. You can manipulate them more easily. And if you're going at it at a path of this is what I'm trying to get, that was all manipulation. But hey, that's exactly the problem with the system is that when you're asking these questions, you need to be asking the right questions and doing it the right way and being fair about it. But we're often not. We're often slanted and skewed to an objective. We all have a purpose out there, and there's always some sort of political thing going on or some sort of background story of why we're doing this to appease the media, to appease the public, because we want to vote, whatever it is, whatever, or we want to be the governor the next time, or whatever it is. That's what the people in these offices tend to be. Is the other scary part? Is they're politically charged offices that are making decisions on justice system, things that deal with your life. That's crazy scary. It really should be that they're worried about their office and convictions more than justice. And that's always the problem to me is look at my record. Like, hey, am I undefeated? Like, doesn't matter. It's how did you present the truth out there? And then you have to hope that the jury believes you.
And it seems like seems like prosecutors, even when they lose a case or it gets tossed out, never want to admit that they might have fucked up. It seems like they have a hard time taking responsibility for that, and it's always that just kind of drives me nuts. Like sometimes you see a dude get let out of jail or something. It was wrongfully convicted and they can't even fucking apologize for it, and you're just taking years out of someone's life and you can't even say sorry, dude.
That's why you have to sue them. I mean, that's why civil rights attorneys make a lot of money, because then you have to show them in court that they did is wrong. And again, it's back to take a decade of your life in the justice system and the court system for stuff. And it's a shame, because really we're at a point in the system where we can do better, and we should be doing better, and we're not doing better because we're not checking the powers that may be. We just don't. We can't. And the people need to do it by getting on juries and voting and listening, saying, hey, not guilty. Like, prove your damn cases. We're not, as lawyers, without talking about jury nullification, but things like cannabis, that's something that people should really understand, that you can get on a jury for a cannabis case and say not guilty because I don't believe that it should be unlawful. I don't think that you think we should go to jail for cannabis at all.
Would that disqualify you from sitting on a jury in a cannabis trial?
It should, but I mean, technically, you're supposed to follow the law, but no one can really stop you.
Tell them.
Well, there's a name called jury nullification for a reason, because it exists and people do it, and you just can't talk about it. You can't say, hey, you can do whatever you want.
So if you kept it quiet, hypothetically, say if someone pulled me for a jury for cannabis, I could just never mention it, go through the whole thing, say not guilty, and no one would ever know. Hypothetically, not to say I would do that, but
hypothetically, you could just believe that they're not right. You could just not think that it's unlawful and not believe that they had something unlawful on them and not believe it was marijuana. Like for marijuana, I mean, there's so many issues with marijuana nowadays. Like, how do you even know what marijuana is after all the conversions and different cannabinoids and whatever were substances? So the cops don't know.
Have you ever handled any civil asset forfeiture cases?
I'm not a civil asset I've done civil forfeiture cases, but that's not something I'm an expert in or do much of. I've dealt with them for clients in criminal matters where it's a quasi forfeiture matter. So it depends on how you want to look at that. So there's like a motion of return of property after you get involved in criminal cases to get like your guns back, your money back, your whatever it would be.
Yeah, and it sounds like, it sounds like even in a lot of cases where there's no crime proven, I don't want to say most, it sounds like a decent chunk of people still aren't able to get their shit back, because once again, you have to spend all this money to go now back to court, and it sounds like the burden of proof changes a little bit, maybe, or something.
Well, the forfeiture proceedings get interesting, especially because like they'll often serve, like there was a big problem I know in our county with like how they serve people and how people were getting notice. So you're violating due process rights. Due process is basically the constitutional right to due process. You can't deprive somebody of their rights without due process of law, which is just basically a notice and opportunity to be heard. That's what due process, generally speaking, is a fundamental answer, like a definition.
Mm.
Notice and an opportunity to be heard. So that's what due process should be about.
Mm.
And that's what we deprive people of consistently, is their right to be heard. And that's the central thing we started talking about, is the justice system in general, of how we're setting people up. Like, I know we're here in the elephant room. I'm involved in this murder case right now that's got a lot of tension on it. And, I think it strike that, sorry. It exemplifies what we're talking about here of the justice system. It exemplifies how you have prosecutors, they get up and do a big party of how they're won.
Yeah, and I
And
watched it,
all
and I watched the whole press conference, just the whole half hour, and they line them all up in a row, and yeah, carry on, sir.
it's congratulations, we did a good job, this is over, game over, we made an arrest, it's done, there's no more questions to be had, these are the facts as we state. They say my client's a killer, just straight up say he is, instead of he's alleged of murder or alleged of homicide. He
Yeah, so
is a killer to them.
right out the gate in this press conference, that was the one thing I noticed, was that it was like 10 seconds in, he said, we got the murderer or whatever he said. And then 7 minutes later, he comes back to the correct language where he starts calling him the defendant,
The
which
defendant or
so
the accused,
so
we're
as
not
I
doing
said,
that.
like just like with these lies on the internet or something, it happens like that and it's quick. And it doesn't take long and the damage is done.
Yep.
You've already potentially tainted a jury pool right there, in my opinion. You're planting the
Well,
idea in his head that he already did it.
but I mean, at least what I've heard around here, everybody's already tainted because they're saying that it must be guilty because they said so. And that's not, if we go back to what the justice is to be, there's only one side again. We're listening to one side of the story. We're not listening to both sides. And we're not hearing an analysis of the facts from both angles. You haven't seen the evidence yet, and you're saying he's guilty. And then you're saying, well, then the way they make it seem is he must be guilty because we're saying it. And their
A
job,
bunch of people are saying it.
yeah, but think about it, their job, what we talked about in the beginning, as a prosecutor, is to do justice, right? You're a minister of justice. You have a special role and responsibility as a prosecutor. You're not a normal lawyer anymore when you're a prosecutor, because you have that power of people's lives in your hands. So you have a higher duty to the justice system to act responsibly with this information and not stand up there like a bunch of buffoons and pat each other on the back and say, ha ha ha, we did it, he's guilty. Well, guess what? He's not guilty. He's innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law, after presenting due process, after analyzing the facts, and after having his own experts and witnesses. But again, as we know, as we talked about, it's slanted, it's one-sided. They
Yeah.
have
So
all
let
of
me
it.
ask you this. Oh, sorry to interject. So I'm looking at here we got a story in the New York Post. Here we got Law and Crime, NBC News, Fox 29, Philadelphia, I believe was the half hour interview. Here we got 6 ABC. Here we got the Philadelphia Inquirer, WFMZ, CBS News. Let me ask you, have you been given a half hour press conference on Fox News at all to state your case?
I mean, I'm sure I could have if I wanted to, but that's
Would they
not.
do? Would they do that?
I don't know. I wouldn't trust them to, because again, I think they would take my statements and chop it up
Sure.
and play it to what the story that plays to them is. And I don't. I want to rather use my own social media to say what I want to say, to say, hey, you can't chop this up. At least people can know what we're saying is that, hey, this isn't. He's not a killer. That he has a defense that he wants to put out there, but he's innocent, proven guilty. He doesn't say anything. They have to prove their case, and you can't just take what they're saying as facts and true until you hear every side of it. And that hasn't happened yet. And even the way the system works, the next hearing is called a preliminary hearing. That's a rubber stamp case, if you want to call it that, for lack of a better word. All they have to do is get up there and reread what they wrote. And as long as they meet the elements of the crime, everything they say is considered true. There's no even question of the credibility they say. So a cop can lie through this whole first proceeding and get you charged all the way up to that level. Once you get to the court of pleas, it's called here. So the next court level, it's like the state level. Once you're there, I mean, you have charges now. You're looked at like a criminal. You're guilty because you're charged. The cop said you did it, so you must have done it. And that's how they treat you. And I talked to a lot of my clients about this. We have to answer, the whole system pushes you to a plea deal. They charge the crap out of you to push you to plead something less so they can get you into the system. And once you get the system, In our county, it's like a 50% recidivism rate. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, like everybody goes back. Once you get in there, there's a whole problem with getting out. And that's what, and then you have to pay the system. You got to pay to the system for them to prosecute you and put you in. The system needs more money. They need to feed the jails. They need to feed the workers. They need to feed the DA's pockets. They need to feed all this stuff so that the system is hungry and needs money, and you're the result. They arrest you. And again, remember, we're paying for this. We need to put a change to this. We need to get on juries and we need to listen objectively to facts. You have to look at how, if they're saying stuff to you, shouldn't you think about how they're only saying certain things and where is the big pieces of evidence? Where are the rest of the things? And that's how I like to think is like, oh, sure, they said these 4 things, but where are these other big things? Why don't they have that? They have all the money and power and time to do this. They can pick when to arrest you. They have time to do this. This is all they have. This is like, if that's all they have, is that really enough? Do you not have any doubt in your mind? If you have doubt in your mind, you should be saying not guilty.
Absolutely. I noticed that too. Was that the DA who gave the press conference there, I assume?
Yeah.
So I noticed one reporter asked him a question that he was very dismissive of, and it was like one of the I'm not going to get into the details, but it seems like when there certain reporters I know are cop friendly, law enforcement friendly, and they come in, they frame their questions very like softball. And then when someone sort of challenges the official statement that he just gave for 17 minutes or 20 minutes, however long it was, he says, I think if you just look at the facts, you'll come to the same conclusion. I'm like, I think she just heard you state the facts and is actually, her gears are turning and she's not coming to the same conclusion. And now you've just brushed off a pretty decent question, I thought.
I mean, there's definitely, like in this case and every other case, there's always questions. I mean, think about it this way: if there wasn't a question about who did this, they would have arrested this guy a month ago.
Right. There was a length of time between. How long was that?
I mean, I guess according to them, they found the body, I guess on the 18th of January. So we're almost like a month later now where there's arrests. So, I mean, yeah, there's stuff to do. I'm not saying that. But again, if they're so sure, they're so sure about it. And that shouldn't be the way this is. He should be cloth. You carry a cloth of innocence. All right. You go in this innocent. Well, the system does not make you feel innocent when you're arrested. It's all eyes on you. You're guilty. You go to jail. You fight from jail.
Well, your client is also a black man too, as well.
He is a black man, yes.
And so that could, I've heard that sometimes those guys get looked at funny in the legal system.
I will say the area this is in is a predominantly white area, and that's a concern, obviously, always.
Yeah, I heard you say something on maybe one of your videos online.
I mean, it's a concern that you have a predominantly white area with cops that maybe aren't as skilled as other cops. Different jurisdictions have different things, so you got to look at also the cops that are investigating. If, like I said, remember the ripple effect we talked about, one stone. So this is all started by a small town police department that could have messed a lot of things up real early. And there's a lot of things that may or may not happen in this case that could draw questions onto their big evidence. And that's every case. That's my job, to draw questions out there of to why didn't you do this? Why is this? And people should be asking those questions instead of just assuming what they're saying is true. And I think if you ask the questions of why this, why are you missing this? Why is there a big gap here? Why is there a gap here? Why do you only have that evidence? It's interesting to look at it that way. And you have to kind of look at it at a bigger picture.
Which is why you should be able to depose those people.
But see, that you don't get to depose them in our world in Pennsylvania. Is you get to put them on a stand and question them, limited to objections, limited to cross-examination, limited to the evidence they gave you, to the motions that limit your questions again.
But you can can you look at the prosecution's depositions and like form your?
Well, we don't you get their statements that they took, and it's called discovery. But again, you have to trust that they're giving you everything they give you, and it's a whole nother ballgame of when do you get it, how do you get it.
Yeah, it sounds like they hit you with a lot of shit real quick at the last minute, maybe.
Correct. and then they want you to pour through it and go, and you know, you have to hire your own experts to analyze it and go through it, and you have to spend money to really analyze what they're saying, because
Sounded like
you
maybe a
can't.
lot of money to get your own experts.
Yeah, it's not cheap to do. The justice system is expensive. It really is an expensive system, and you know, it's tough. If you're poor in the system, it's tough to win because you're poor and you don't have the money to do it. You have to petition the court for funds. Hope they give you funds. Hope you can get a decent expert in there. And remember, your experts may not be as good as the cops who testify all the time. Remember, they're all their experts are expert witnesses because they do it so many times.
Yeah.
How many times you testified in court? 500 times. This is your 600th time you testified about something like this. Of course, you're going to be better than the guy who's nervous and never done it before, or the defendant who's never been involved in the system whatsoever. And remember, our system says he doesn't have to testify at all. No defendants have to testify. That's because they're supposed to be innocent, so they prove it.
I wanted to throw this note in. I don't know if you watched the tail end of that press conference, but there's about a 3-minute section at the end where they've all left the room and the camera is just on. And the camera, you could see them still changing the slide a few times, and they put it back to your client, and they like zoomed in on it and just left it there. And first of all, when the press conference broke up, I thought it was super tasteless that they all stood around kind of laughing and joking. I found that to be kind of disgusting.
Like I said, again, they think that, look, I guess when you get cases, you get to form your case, pick your cases. You try to go with only winning cases, and you want a high conviction rate. You get cocky, you get arrogant, and you think that you're going to win all the time. And you don't think of it the same way. You know, you're only thinking this shouldn't be a competition in one, and to them often it is, of we have this victim's side, and therefore what we did is right, and doesn't matter about the other guy because he must be a bad guy. But again, they're presuming he is guilty, which is a huge problem right now. You can't presume that somebody's guilty. You have to be innocent until proven guilty. And that's the assumption we start this. If we don't start this system on the assumption that someone is innocent, then the system's wrong, because that's how it's set up. And we seem to be starting on the opposite assumption. They're guilty, and what they're doing there is exactly what we're talking about. They're saying, ha ha ha, we're right, he's guilty. And know what we're going to do, we're going to say it in front of the media, we're going to make it look like he's guilty, and we're going to zoom in on him and show everybody the guilty guy. So when you see him, you think guilty guy.
And not just media, but a bunch of different media. We're going to put it out all over the place. We're going to repeat, which is sort of a propaganda model, really. And I'm not into that type of shit.
And then they call the defense attorney last minute and say, "Do you have any comment?" So like what? Oh, that crap they just spewed on TV. You know, I mean,
were you done? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like when they come to you, like, what do you say oftentimes? And the answer is, you just have to do what's right for your client. And you know, as an attorney, we have ethical obligation when people make statements like that. You have ethical obligation to defend certain things when they make blatant accusations and don't say they're accusations. They say they're facts. They say somebody is something, instead of, we're alleging this based off facts, based off what we believe to be the facts. These are the facts. They're not disputed. I guarantee you they will be disputed in court with experts, with people, with other statements. And their whole theories often run on like one assumption that can get picked apart often. I mean, looks like they have certain theories and assumptions that they have to hit, right? And that's what they're laying out here, is these assumptions and theories that have to come true. And they haven't been tested. We haven't tested them yet, right? Mm-hmm. Has anybody seen the stuff they've written in here, right? They write stuff and they say it's true. But just remember this, even some of the stuff may not be in court later. So this is another problem with you going and telling everybody about it, is what if this stuff was unlawfully obtained? What if this was tainted? What if there's this and that? and now you're telling everybody this stuff exists, and now it doesn't exist.
Another great point.
We're just trying to skew the system, because this also to me is a sign of weakness, in the sense of, if you have to win your case this way, then that means maybe your facts aren't as strong. Because if your case is that strong, you don't need to say much other than, we have really strong facts, we have really strong case, we're arresting this person because we believe he's guilty, and it will show that. Done. That's what you need to say. And guess what? You can put that out there, and you can do it, and you can go forward, and you can prove that stuff in court. If it's so damn good, that jury's gonna be back in 1 second and say guilty, because guess what? You had all the facts behind it. Sorry, I get passionate about this because it is what I believe.
You gotta do. I mean, this is what's the maximum sentence here that we could be facing in this case?
Life. The rest of his life.
Have you defended any life cases before?
I have not defended life.
This is your first one, huh? Are you stressed
out?
I
guess say I've dealt with homicide cases previously, but I wasn't like the first chair on it or something like that. So I was with other people. So this is the first one I'll be leading the charge.
Okay. How do you stay calm? It must be pressure, man.
It's course. There's always pressure in everything you do, and I think that's my job, and it is very stressful. But I have to remember that I have someone's life in my hands too. It's sad that there is somebody. It's especially hard when somebody died, because you want to make sure it's right. Like, how many times do we watch like the Innocence Project get in, or other people come in on appeals and really dig apart these cases that everybody assumes is what it is, and it gets turned on its head and goes, oh my God, how did we miss that? Oh, we have this new science comes in and says, oh my God, this was wrong. I mean, there's a lot of things that show up that can completely flip things on its head.
A lot of murders getting overturned with DNA evidence and shit.
And think about it, I didn't see any DNA evidence in this. Just think about some of the they always say, when you don't hear those things, you should really think about that. Like, why am I hearing what people are saying?
Exactly. Some people only listen for the words. You don't listen for what's being left out.
Like, even when you talk about certain things, like, you got to remember there's different ways of analyzing things. Like, I talk about like drug dogs, right? I deal a lot with drug dogs and drug cases. When you deal with drug dogs and drug cases, you have to remember that doesn't mean the drugs are. So let's say a drug dog hits, doesn't mean the drug dog's hitting on the drugs in a bag or in a situation. Doesn't mean the dogs can do false positives. It can also be an over aggressive handler. The handlers, they could want to please their handlers because they keep running them over the same area. Then there's a situation of, sometimes people have drugs inside bags, right? Well, they may be hitting on something, but they're actually not hitting on the drugs inside the bag. They're hitting because that person, like, let's say, smoked a blunt in their clothing and they had that bag with them, right? So now they're getting the terpene smell in the bag, not the actual, let's say, heroin in the that's like sealed the hell up in the bags. So, like, if you start taking those examples, maybe they're getting hit on something else and they're having false positives. And I don't know if you ever watch like drug sniffs when they do stuff, or dog handlers when they shove the dogs in the windows to get them.
Dude, I've seen dogs I've seen videos where it definitely looks like the dog did not indicate on anything, and the cop kind of like it'll make a different other gesture that's not necessarily, usually what's the indicator? You sit or you lay down or it's something like that. But sometimes when they can't get him to do that, it seems like they'll sort of like maybe yank his leash up so he jumps in the window or something. Yeah, it's like that didn't look like the signal right there. It looked like you kind of tricked your dog into doing something else just so you could get into this car.
Exactly. And you're like, hey, well, quick question that. And it's like, well, then guess what? If the cop did it, it must be true. That cop dog must be right, because that's what we're trained to believe.
Well, you said you have a friend who trains police dogs. Is that right?
We do. I have a lot of friends that dealt with them, and we've talked to them, and we'll continue to deal with people throughout our cases to analyze.
Has he taught you about how some cops might try to throw that off, or how I'm sure like he taught you how they're trained, but has he taught you like how people will maybe misuse that?
I don't make comment on that right now.
Okay, cool, sure. That would be interesting to hear maybe later. I hope we can.
Yeah, there's a lot of great. I mean, there's a lot of great experts out there that can explain things, and even like it blows your mind when you start going through like the phone data, and the things that you start seeing in these cases are really there's so many different angles to them. There's ways to analyze it, ways to pick things apart and to recreate things. And you can get really technical. Again, it all costs money. So how much money do you have to defend things?
Using animals to generate probable cause though just seems fucking flimsy to me.
It's done quite frequently, and it's funny because even think about like cannabis. Of all they're trained to do is smell terpenes, and I mean they're wrong quite frequently.
See, they're having to retire a lot of drug dogs now that cannabis is legal, because now that it's legal, they can't bust people for it. And then once you train them to do it, it sounds like they can't untrain them to do it.
Yep. I don't know. I'm not an expert in drug dogs, so I don't want to say other than, when you start looking into the different things in the justice system, it's all about the experts you get and how you analyze things. And really that gets down to the details of the courtroom of when we're presenting it and when you're hearing the evidence, not in the wee hours of the beginning of the case when someone's jumping up and down saying, I won. I mean, you should always question when somebody says they win before they start the whole thing. This is round one of a baseball game. This isn't the end of the ninth inning. This is the first inning. We're just warming up.
Boy, and I saw that press conference you did. Was that mom?
Yep.
That must have been kind of intense, huh?
Yeah. It's sad. Look, everybody's got family, and there's a lot of people involved in these situations. And my client has kids. He has a wife. I mean, this isn't like, you have to remember people's lives at stake here. This is not a little thing. When people get arrested, people get taken away from their kids, their family. Somebody died in this situation. It's unfortunate. There's a dead body. I mean, we want to know who did that, right? Everybody does. But that doesn't mean because the DA says it's my client at all. It does not mean that. It means he's innocent until proven guilty. And they seem to think for whatever reason it is, but they haven't given you all the reasons yet. And we haven't seen all the evidence as to what it could be. And, there's a lot of questions to be had about everything. I always question, you always should question things. You should always question when there's lovers involved and things involved. You should question things,
I know I certainly have some questions. I'm hoping maybe down the line we could pick that up, dude, because certainly wasn't a slam dunk press conference for that DA for me, and I'm always like skeptical. But boy,
but that's what we need more skeptical people out there. We need people to really analyze what they're saying and think about it differently, because the people I seem to be in my area have rushed to a judgment and said, hey, he's guilty. Why the hell are you representing a guilty person?
Do you feel some heat from the public for defending this guy?
Of course. But I would say it's my job to represent people and to give them their day in court and to get them justice. And that is what I stand for and believe in. I don't really care what people think about that. I don't care if people want to attack me personally. It doesn't, sure, it like hurts to hear things said of you, but this is my job. It's what I believe in. And like, if you remember John Adams, he represented the red coat, we go back to the time that's what our country is founded upon, is giving somebody their day in court and giving them justice. And you know what, if he goes to court and he gets to get a fair trial and then he's found guilty, it's a different story. But as of this time, as of right now, he stands innocent, and we shouldn't be out there tainting the jury pool so that we can get a conviction. We should be worried about our evidence in court to get a conviction. And that's what we're worried about on our side, is what evidence is there? How do we defend against the evidence? And how do we present our alibis and our statements that show that may or may not show different things than what they're saying? And there is two sides to every story. And my world is like this. We often say this. There's your side, there's my side, and there's the truth. There's three sides to every story, right? Because your brain is also going to perceive things a little differently than everybody. Everybody has a different perspective, and you can see the same thing. Everybody can watch the exact same thing and see it a little bit different. It's your matter of perspective. But it doesn't mean what you saw isn't true or not. It's just that we have to get to the truth of the matter, not just looking at it from this side. We got to go on this side too. And we got to look under it and over it. And then maybe we get a little better angle here and look at the full 360 here.
Mm-hmm.
We got planes being shut down from the sky right the fuck now. I mean, we should all be asking some questions right now, right?
Yeah. So let me ask you, how long do you have to prepare for this?
The hearing's coming up. It was supposed to be next week, but they pushed it, I think, a month. I don't have the exact date in front of me. I want to say it's about March, and that's just a preliminary hearing. They said it's a prima facie standard at our thing, which is there's a crime committed, which there's a dead body, but in this case, there's a dead body and an allegation that it's a homicide with not much cause of death.
Broken ribs.
Like, that's what it says. It's really confusing to me to see stuff like that, but I don't think comments specifically other than, hey, they're supposed to present their case. They have to prove that somebody died of homicide there. And if they present enough facts that say that just meet the elements and they could possibly be my client, then it's enough to get to the next level. It's not a proof beyond a reasonable doubt standard. It's not saying he's guilty or innocent. It's just saying that they did a good enough job writing facts down that, if proven true in court, would be enough to possibly allow a juror to find him guilty. Like, there's a lot of possibilities in there to get to that level, right?
Possibly, maybe could in the future consider.
So it's a really low, like, if there's a speed bump, it's one of those really, really low speed bumps that everybody can get over, even like little tricycles can get over. It's not one of those really like sharp yellow ones that everybody's like, bam, it's a little speed bump. So hopefully, you always see what happens, and sometimes they offer deals, sometimes they don't offer deals, but it's the first crack of the case. And remember, we have to go to their area where they've already tainted the jury and do this case. So there's always motions and stuff to try to get venue changed.
Change the venue, yeah.
And there's a lot of things to be done because you never know. I mean, you want to give your client the most fair opportunity to have a fair trial. You want him to be given a fair trial. I mean, I think we should all want. You got to remember, if you were accused of something, would you not want a fair trial? Would you not want to be heard openly and honestly? And remember, he doesn't have to say anything. So they should at least review this evidence with skepticism and not be tainted walking in there saying, I know I'm going to hear how he's guilty, because that's what they're trying to say right now.
Let's see. I'm pretty much out of shit here. I think we got to the end of the stuff I can ask about. I do.
We can always follow up later.
Yeah, I hope later. So. I want to first of all just say thanks for your time, man, and thanks for reaching out. For sure, that was a call I never expected to get, and I feel.
Well, we've talked before about doing podcasts and working together, and it seemed like more time better than ever to really get this discussion started about the justice system, because I think this really exemplified some of my concerns with the justice system, and it really does relate back to the cannabis world and the cannabis prisoners out there that are being wrongfully imprisoned right now, because we're rushing to judgments on people, and we let this government have a lot of power to just convict us, and we're not getting on juries and listening to these cases or exercising our right to jury nullification even. We need to be doing that.
I want to let you hit a high note here before you leave. It sounded like you said you had filed some motions to successfully get people released from prison.
Oh, we've done some pardons, and they're supposed to be expedited, but they're still ongoing after how many years now? Almost. It's the expedited pardon progress. We're working on some other things. I know there's an ongoing case right now. We're battling the Delta 8 status in Pennsylvania.
Oh, boy.
Trying to say Delta 8 is a Schedule 1 controlled substance and therefore unlawful. So you see all like the mom and pop shops at Delta 8. Technically, they're all committing a felony right now in Pennsylvania. And the people are getting their stores raided, they're losing their lives, they're losing everything because of ambiguity / confusion in the law right now.
Well, they are trying to crack down on those synthetics. It seems like
they are, anyway. But under federal law, it's really clear that they're lawful. I mean, the cases like AKV, these future be Boyd's or something like that. It was a trademark case that they went and analyzed this under the Farm Bill and determined that it's lawful, that Delta 8. So as long as the way it's written right now, 2018 Farm Bill doesn't regulate that and makes it lawful as long as it comes from hemp, defined as 0.3% Delta 9 THC or less. So as long as you derive it from that, it becomes lawful under the federal definition of 2018 Farm Bill. There's that.
There was one. Oh, when you were doing child sex crimes, did you ever put any pedophiles in jail?
Hope so.
Yes. I was gonna get
Uh,
you a cape here. I just wanted to
uh,
like, yeah, get them.
I mean, I would say that that's a really tough area. I give credit to anybody that can work in that area of law. It's tough, and you see a lot of things there. And I think that also hones your ability with credibility. And I think with dealing with children, that you have a whole nother angle to look at, and how to get children to speak in court, and how to actually talk to children, because you're dealing with children, and then you're dealing with you know bad people a lot of times. And it's
Oh,
crazy
it's
because
interesting. Oh, so when you're doing your
it's like, I mean,
interviews,
so it's pedophilia, because kids, it's not ped, that'd actually be feet.
oh,
um
sorry.
it's so like, if you think of pediatric, you're dealing with kids, so you're actually doing pedophilia. And
True.
it's
Yeah.
it's one of those things everybody says that wrong. That's how you know somebody worked in this area or not,
I
truthfully,
thought that
how they
was
say
just
that
how
word.
British people said it.
No, it's literally everybody says it. And then that's one of the things they teach you in school for this kind of stuff, is how that worked and how the grooming process. So crazy stuff. Definitely put people in jail for that, and definitely
Good.
would say that's an area I never want to think about when I ever again in my life.
Bravo, man. Doing us all a favor. Um, yeah,
Thank you for your time today.
Dude, thank you. Chris Mandracchia, CDM Law. If there's anything we missed or any shout outs or anything you want, I always leave the last word for the guest. So
I just want to say thank you very much for taking your time on this day. Go Eagles. I'm from right outside Philadelphia. We got the Super Bowl today. Go Birds. We're Eagles fans here, and we're excited for the Super Bowl today. So, all right, I want to give a shout out to the Eagles. Go Birds.
word up.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate your time. And let's one more thing is free all the cannabis prisoners. Just free them. That's what we need to know, is they all need to go free. They shouldn't be in jail. Not one of them.
Mm. Great last note. Peace, my
Thank you,
man.
man. Peace. Have a great day, man.
You as well.